Hi, I'm Casey Smith.
And I'm Carol Montgomery. Welcome to Central Avenue.
Central Avenue is a new concept in corporate communications designed to provide you, Rocky Flats employees, and your families with up-to-date news and information about the plant.
We'll also tell you about company-sponsored events, trips, and recreational opportunities available to you at greatly reduced prices.
One of our goals on Central Avenue is to help our families understand what we do at Rocky Flats. Since we can't bring them out to the plant to see for themselves, our feature story does the next best thing and brings the plant to our families.
Since 1952, Rocky Flats has set atop this bluff northwest of Denver. Although the plant receives almost daily coverage from both electronic and printed media, the basic operation of our plant is still a mystery to many people, including our families. In this story, we'll show you what goes on inside Rocky Flats and how we fit into the nation's nuclear weapons complex.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Each year, the President of the United States authorizes the Department of Energy to produce and maintain the weapons in our nuclear arsenal. The work is performed at 7 production facilities located across the country. Each facility performs a unique role in the production process. At Rocky Flats, we have 3 main missions: nuclear weapons component production, plutonium recovery, and waste management. The overriding priority in each of these missions is protecting the safety of employees, the public, and the environment. Rocky Flats produces weapons components from 4 materials: plutonium, beryllium, depleted uranium, and stainless steel. But it is plutonium that makes Rocky Flats unique. Behind me is the Perimeter Security Zone, or the PSZ. It is here, behind these security fences, that plutonium operations are performed. Plutonium is the primary radioactive material used in modern nuclear weapons. It is radioactive and potentially dangerous, so employee protection is a top priority. To protect workers, plutonium is handled primarily inside lead-lined glove boxes. Here, plutonium components are produced using state-of-the-art metal fabrication equipment. These operations are carried out under carefully controlled conditions to protect employees and ensure that no plutonium is allowed to escape into the environment. Beryllium is another metal used in the fabrication of nuclear weapons. Beryllium is not radioactive, but dust from machining operations can be toxic, so it also requires special handling procedures. Depleted uranium, another metal used in the fabrication of nuclear weapons, is machined outside of glove boxes due to its low level of radioactivity. Stainless steel is the 4th material commonly used in Rocky Flats manufacturing operations. Stainless steel components are fabricated using traditional machining methods, but they are required to meet the exacting specifications required for weapons production. Rocky Flats' other missions, plutonium recovery and waste management, support production operations by ensuring a steady supply of weapons-grade plutonium and by administering the waste that is a byproduct of weapons production. Plutonium is expensive, several times the price of gold, so wherever possible, scrap and residues from production operations are recovered and reused. Additionally, the plutonium components from retired weapons are sent to Rocky Flats, where they are disassembled and the plutonium is reprocessed for use in modern weapons systems. Some waste materials are contaminated with such small levels of plutonium that recovery is not economically feasible. These materials must be disposed of as transuranic waste. Rocky Flats generates radioactive and non-radioactive waste. Additionally, mixed waste, radioactive waste mixed with hazardous chemicals or materials, is also generated. All waste is processed and handled in accordance with state and federal regulations. Not everyone who works at Rocky Flats is directly involved in nuclear weapons production. Many personnel make their living providing general plant support. Perhaps the most important of these support functions is protecting the health, safety, and environment of employees and the surrounding communities. This includes continuous monitoring of building air emissions, outside air, surface and treated sanitary wastewater, groundwater, and regional water supplies, including tap water. Additionally, more than 40,000 air, water, and soil samples are taken annually on-site and in surrounding communities to assure that environmental controls are working and that Rocky Flats is in compliance with all applicable environmental regulations. These samples are analyzed and the results are shared with the Colorado Department of Health and the EPA at monthly state exchange meetings. Monitoring activities are not limited to the environment. Special precautions are taken to carefully monitor each employee and document radiation exposure. Every employee leaving a radiation area is checked for possible contamination. Dosimetry badges are routinely analyzed to determine radiation exposure. Body counts are performed to determine if radioactive materials have been inhaled. A detailed analysis of personal radiation exposure is continually updated and provided to each employee. Security is another major consideration at the plant. As you can imagine, the materials and information kept here require extraordinary levels of protection. In fact, Rocky Flats is one of the most closely guarded sites in the country. Rocky Flats maintains the largest private security force in the state of Colorado. Plant security inspectors are highly skilled professionals and work closely with state and local law enforcement agencies. Additionally, Rocky Flats maintains a full-time fire department. A complete medical facility and staff is also maintained on site to perform routine physical exams and attend to emergency situations if they arise. That's a brief look inside Rocky Flats. As you can see, there's nothing mysterious about the plant. In fact, much of what goes on here is typical of any large manufacturing operation. At Rocky Flats, we recognize the importance of our national defense mission, but we also recognize the importance of carrying out that mission in a safe and responsible manner.
Next on Central Avenue, we'll take a look at issues making the news at Rocky Flats.
But first, we'll take time out to salute these award-winning Rocky Flats employees.
Central Avenue salutes the 44 employees receiving awards of excellence for their significant contributions to the nuclear weapons program. The awards were presented on January 12th by Rear Admiral John Michael Barr, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Military Applications, and recognize achievements in quality, productivity, cost savings, or creativity. Congratulations to these outstanding Rocky Flats employees.
And now, a review of key issues currently making the headlines. It's been nearly 2 months since EG&G began managing the Rocky Flats plant. We asked General Manager Phil Warner if he is satisfied with the plant's progress so far.
I think there's some good and some bad. I've got my organization in place. All the people that I brought in are here. By the way, they were my first choice in every case, which is I feel good about. But I think in some of the areas that you've heard me complain about, I'm having a hard time getting the word out and communicating to all employees about what we're up to. I guess I'm not frustrated about it, but I'm still a little disappointed at our progress there. Our resumption of operations activity started a little slower than I would have liked, but it's moved along. I say in general I'll give us about, maybe a B minus or C plus. But we'll do better.
Doing better is the whole reason behind the plant's mission and value statement, which was mailed to all employees on February 5th. In it, Warner describes the plant's mission and the values that will shape the culture at Rocky Flats.
I want to make sure that I live by those values, and if people think that either me or the people that work for me are not living to the values, or that we're making policy decisions or taking actions that seem at conflict, I want to hear about it.
The Plutonium Operations Resumption Team has developed a phased resumption management plan for restarting plutonium operations which have been on hold since December of 1989. The plan outlines 6 basic areas that must be addressed before operations can resume. They include identifying and verifying vital safety systems, verifying that safety-related alarms and indicators are functional, ensuring that employees are properly trained to conduct operations, reviewing safety analysis reports and procedures, verifying the condition of equipment and systems, and ensuring that effective administrative controls are in place. The plan was submitted to the DOE on January 31st. Employees in the affected buildings will continue working on cleanup operations, preventative maintenance, and training.
Rocky Flats has embarked on an aggressive campaign to remove groundwater contamination from below the 881 hillside south and east of the plant. Tom Greengard is the manager of environmental restoration.
Contamination at the hillside consists of solvents. These are a class of chemicals called volatile organic compounds that you read about in the papers every day. Trichloroethylene, perchloroethylene, things like that. There is also some question of whether there are some metals in the groundwater, including uranium. When we go to treatment for this system, we will be including treatment for metals, uranium, and the volatile organic compounds in the system. There are a number of sites on the hillside which were used for various waste management practices in the past. Things like oil drums were stored there. There were solvent storage areas on the hillside. There are even some areas which we had reports that unknown chemicals were dumped into them. All these activities took place in the 1950s and 1960s. There were a couple spills that occurred in the 1970s and one in January of 1981.
Construction of the water treatment facility began on January 15th. Construction of a well and a French drain will follow. The entire system will become operational sometime in early 1991, but treatment of contaminated water could begin as early as November 1990.
The Department of Energy is preparing to initiate the Plutonium Recovery Modification Project, or PRMP. The DOE plans to prepare an environmental impact statement to ensure pertinent environmental considerations are addressed in the planning, construction, and operation of this project. The proposed action involves modifying Building 371 at Rocky Flats and includes decontamination and renovation of parts of the existing building. It also involves extending the building to accommodate technically advanced process equipment and support systems. The PRMP is vital for replacing aging recovery facilities and process systems currently utilized at Rocky Flats. The PRMP will increase overall worker safety, reduce worker radiation exposure by 50%, reduce production waste by as much as 70%, and bring the plant's recovery operations into full compliance with DOE's new nuclear design safety requirements. The PRMP will also play a key role in the eventual cleanup of Rocky Flats production buildings if plant operations are relocated. The current schedule calls for design, construction, and testing to take place over the next 7 years. The modified facility is expected to be fully operational in 1997 and cost between $500 and $600 million. The PRMP is the preferred option, but 3 other alternatives are currently being considered in the environmental impact statement process. The continued use of existing facilities, or no-action option, would maintain the present aging recovery operations in Buildings 771 and 776. The partial relocation option would entail moving some recovery operations to another DOE site. And finally, the total relocation option would involve transferring recovery operations to another DOE facility. Additional options may be identified through the scoping process. Pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act, the Department of Energy intends to prepare an Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. The process consists of 5 major steps. First, a notice of intent is published in the Federal Register to announce the EIS and scoping process. The public is then requested to consider and comment on the proposed scope and content. Next, a draft EIS is issued, and public comments are again solicited. After those comments are assessed, the final environmental impact statement is published. The DOE then issues its record of decision on the project. Information about each public involvement opportunity will be announced by the DOE. Employees are encouraged to learn about the PRMP and express their views as private citizens.
A Rocky Flats family needs your help. 6-year-old Crystal Lockhart, daughter of Suzanne and Rick Lockhart, was born with Morquio syndrome, an enzyme deficiency that affects the development of bones and soft tissue. The disease can also result in heart failure.
You're giving me the giggles.
Since birth, Crystal's bones have become progressively deformed and movement of her joints has become restricted. Her cheery personality masks the seriousness of her condition.
basic movements become very difficult, like lifting arms over the head or flexibility of fingers, or eventually just walking becomes impossible.
There are two aspects that have affected Crystal. The first is just a foreshortening of stature. So in other words, for her age, she's not growing as rapidly or as tall as we would expect for someone her age. The second is in a gradual deformity of various bones in her body.
The heart problem is usually fatal. That the progressive heart problem that people with Morquio syndrome have is a fatal disorder that will progress usually by either late childhood or young adulthood.
It's put a lot of pressure on the family. We think about it all the time. It's hard to block it out while you're at work and, you know, concentrate on what you need to be doing. But I find myself thinking about it all the time, driving, doing the dishes, whatever.
Morquio syndrome can be treated with a bone marrow transplant. This is a costly procedure which places healthy cells from a donor into Crystal's bloodstream.
Bone marrow cells from some donor are put into Crystal's bloodstream, and they will take up residence in Crystal's bone marrow. And these cells, as long as they stay alive, and we use drugs to try to prevent Crystal's body from rejecting them, and as long as those cells stay alive, they make the enzyme that Crystal can't make.
The procedure will be performed in Minnesota at a cost of $125,000. Insurance will pay most of the costs, but the Lockharts will need help covering expenses for food, travel, and other items during the 2 months required for the procedure. Both parents will take leaves of absence so they can be with Crystal during her stay in the hospital. If you'd like to help, send your tax-deductible contribution to the St. Joseph Hospital Foundation, Crystal Lockhart Fund, 1835 Franklin Street, Denver, Colorado, 80218.
And now, let's take a brief look at other issues making the news at Rocky Flats.
Work on the plant's super compactor continues in Building 776. Information to support an environmental assessment has been sent to the Department of Energy. Permission was granted to perform a warranty checkout beginning January 22nd. The super compactor will reduce the volume of transuranic waste stored at the plant by as much as 50%. The DOE Defense Nuclear Facilities Panel of the House Armed Services Committee visited Rocky Flats on January 15th. The panel, consisting of Congressman John Spratt, Congresswoman Pat Schroeder, and Congressman Norman Sisiski, was joined by Colorado Congressman David Skaggs. The panel toured the plant and met the new EG&G management team. Approximately $105 million will be added to the plant's current operating budget of $450 million. The additional funding will support capital projects and will be used to hire an additional 800 to 1,000 workers. The new employees should be on site this year and will support all plant operations. A Colorado Department of Health study released on February 1st concludes that fish caught in Stanley Lake are safe to eat and pose no health risk. The study was conducted in response to public concern because the lake is located downstream from Rocky Flats. No radioactive materials or other pollutants unique to Rocky Flats were found in fish samples taken from the lake.
Next in our focus story, we'll look at the generation and storage of mixed transuranic waste at Rocky Flats.
But not before talking with Larry and Vince about the importance of wearing seatbelts.
Ramco presents Vince and Larry Smash Hits with timeless classics like and everyone who doesn't buckle up will remember the heart and bone-breaking sounds of
You've Got Me Wrapped Around Your Fender.
Yes, they're all here. All the hits that sent Vince and Larry into the dashboard and through the windshield. Best of all, you can scream along when you don't wear your safety belt. Order now. Ambulances are standing by. Hey, you too can learn a lot from a dummy. Buckle your safety belt today.
Arrive alive. Drive safely.
As the federal government works to find a home for mixed transuranic waste, Rocky Flats draws closer to reaching its storage limit. In our focus story, we'll take a closer look at how this issue developed and what Rocky Flats is doing to minimize the problem.
Rocky Flats has been at the center of a national controversy over what to do with mixed transuranic wastes. This is a complicated issue, which has resulted in threats of plant shutdown and heated debate between state and federal officials. Rocky Flats has been producing what is now called transuranic, or TRU, wastes since it first began operations in 1952. Basically, TRU waste is any material contaminated with plutonium.
Some of the waste is in the form of metals, some of it's in the form of glasses or ceramics, and a lot of it's also in the form of, like I said, clothing and rags and tooling. That's the bulk of what our waste is.
Mixed transuranic wastes are created when these same items are also contaminated with solvents or other hazardous materials regulated by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA. All transuranic wastes are packaged in Department of Transportation approved 55-gallon drums and stored on site while awaiting shipment. Prior to October of 1988, both TRU and mixed TRU wastes were shipped to the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory for interim storage. Ultimately, these wastes were destined for WIPP, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant near Carlsbad, New Mexico, for permanent storage in highly stable underground salt formations. But WIPP encountered problems and failed to open on schedule. As these problems intensified, it became clear that WIPP would not be able to accept waste shipments for some time. In October of 1988, Idaho Governor Cecil Andrus halted all further shipments of TRU waste into his state, citing the federal government's inability to successfully open the WIPP facility. Idaho maintained the only facility in the nation certified to accept mixed transuranic wastes, and an agreement with the state of Colorado limited the amount of waste that could be stored at Rocky Flats. According to the agreement, Rocky Flats can store up to 1,601 cubic yards of TRU mixed wastes in approved facilities like these in Building 664. To put that number in perspective, 1,601 cubic yards is roughly equivalent to 5,840 of these 55-gallon drums. Attempting to solve the problem, the DOE hosted a conference of Western governors in Salt Lake City, Utah. Under pressure, Andrus relented, agreeing to allow further waste shipments into Idaho, but only until September of 1989, when the WIPP facility was scheduled to reopen. But WIPP again failed to open on schedule. As promised, Andrus halted further shipments into Idaho. Once again, Rocky Flats was faced with a waste storage dilemma. Since September, the DOE has presented several options for temporary waste storage, including a plan dividing the waste among 7 states, but each has been met by strong opposition. Rocky Flats still faces a storage limit, but several new developments will enable us to extend operations well beyond the initial estimate of March 1990. Most significant is a successful waste minimization program. Since October 1988, we have significantly reduced the generation of TRU mixed waste.
About 4 years ago, our transuranic waste generation at this plant site was as high as 400 cubic yards per month. When the embargo on shipments to Idaho began last fall, I think it was October of 1988, at that point in time, we'd been generating about 200 cubic yards of transuranic waste per month. And we put on an ambitious program to try and get that down to about 150 cubic yards per month, and we've exceeded that drastically. Over the past 10 months, we've been averaging about 95 cubic yards per month, and over the past 2 or 3 months, it's really been closer to 70 cubic yards per month.
Finally, we should address the issue of safety. Plant, state, and federal officials all agree that TRU wastes stored at the plant are safe and pose no threat to workers or the surrounding environment.
No, we don't feel that the storage of the transuranic mixed waste is any significant threat, that it is stored safely, and that's one of the reasons for having the regulations we do, is to make sure that that storage is safe.
We're allowed to have up to 200 grams of plutonium in each one of the waste drums. The reality of the situation is, out of all the waste drums we have, the thousands of waste drums, if you totaled up the total plutonium content and divided by the number of drums, our average plutonium content per drum is about 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly, 3 or 4 or 5 grams of plutonium per drum.
There's been a tremendous change in procedures at Rocky Flats since the first days that I began inspecting the facility back in 1986. And indeed, in fact, if you go into building 664, where this material is today, you will find a tremendously well-kept area, even for a situation where there's a tremendous storage crunch, and the actual impact to the public health or the risk of an accident occurring is rather minimal.
As the nation's leading producer of TRU wastes, Rocky Flats will be faced with the challenge of waste storage well into the future. Experts agree that only the opening of WIP will solve the problem, but that could take several years. Our continued efforts in the areas of waste minimization and solvent reduction will become increasingly important as we near our storage limit. Look to Central Avenue for continuous coverage of this ongoing issue.
You'll be hearing a lot more about safety in the coming months. We'll tell you why in our perspective story next on Central Avenue.
But first, take some time out to look at these great discount coupons, guaranteed to make the most of your entertainment dollar.
Dining dollars are a great way to stretch your budget. $7 in coupons buys you $10 in dining at participating restaurants in the Denver metro area. After dinner, why not take in a movie? Discount tickets are available for all MAN and AMC theaters. Tickets cost $3 each and can be used for adults or children. Tickets are valid anytime except during special engagements. For more information, contact the Employee Store at 966-7483.
Safety has always been important at Rocky Flats, but now it's receiving even more attention as part of Admiral Watkins' cultural change for the weapons complex. In our perspective story, we'll see how this change in culture will affect Rocky Flats.
For years, there has been outspoken public opposition aimed at Rocky Flats. There have been demonstrations, protests, and encirclements, all designed to sway opinion against the plant. Most of these focused on the morality of nuclear weapons and called for unilateral nuclear disarmament. But more recently, the nature of these protests has changed. Disarmament is still the focus of some groups, but far more public attention is now directed at health, safety, and protecting the environment. State and federal legislation addressing these same issues has mirrored the public's growing concerns. We are the subject of daily media attention. Every decision is questioned, every occurrence deemed newsworthy. But now we are seeing a culture change within the weapons complex, one that has been mandated by the Secretary of Energy, Admiral Watkins.
I come for 30 years in the business of nuclear facilities. I know what it means. I know how tough it is. I know the demands on people with their hands in the glove boxes and what they have to do to prepare themselves. I know what the standards of discipline should be. I know what procedures should be. And we haven't provided the workers here with the elements of safety, environment, and health, which we should have. That's our business, and we should be doing it, and we're starting to do it today.
The Department of Energy has responded to public concern. They have placed their own microscope on Rocky Flats and initiated several safety evaluations, including the DOE Tiger Team report, the Scientech Criticality report, and the Ahern Committee report, to name a few. Watkins has made it clear that weapons production will no longer take priority over safety in the weapons complex. And this attitude is being reflected by the contractors who manage the plants. EG&G, who assumed control of Rocky Flats on January 1st, published this letter to employees. In it, Phil Warner, general manager of the plant, talked about a new safety-oriented management style. According to Warner, EG&G managers will not stifle or ignore your suggestions, especially when safety is at stake. You will be applauded and not intimidated for bringing safety problems to their attention. They will want to hear the bad news. They will want to hear concerns. As for employees, we too have a responsibility to improve plant safety. After all, who has a greater reason to support these efforts than the people who work here? Safety concerns must be reported and acted upon. If safety is to take priority over production, it will require a workforce committed to this principle above all else. With the coming of the new year, Rocky Flats has also entered a new era, one that includes new leadership, new priorities, and new responsibilities. The nation will be watching to see whether we measure up to our promises and the public's expectations. We can approach these challenges with optimism because, as General Manager Phil Warner put it during a November employee address, we will succeed.
We hope you've enjoyed the premiere edition of Central Avenue.
And we'd like to hear what you think about the show. A viewer response card is enclosed in the box for this cassette. If you'll fill it out and return it to us through the plant mail, we'll try to incorporate your ideas into our next edition.
Send your response cards to Employee Communications, Building 111.
Or give us a call at 966-7680. Tell us what you'd like to see on the show. After all, Central Avenue is your program, and we want to make it as good as we can. Thanks for watching. We'll be back in May with the second edition of Central Avenue.
Goodbye.